Here's something nobody wants to say out loud. Younger women aren't just attracted to older men despite the age gap. Sometimes they're attracted because of it. And no, it has nothing to do with money, and it has everything to do with something most men completely misunderstand about attraction. Welcome back. If you're here, you've probably noticed something. You've seen a younger woman walk past men her own age and give her full attention, her real attention, to someone older. Not the richest man in the room, not the tallest, just someone who carried something the others didn't, and you couldn't quite name what it was. That's exactly what we're going to talk about today, because this video, 7 types of older men younger women secretly desire, is not about age. It's about psychology, presence, and a very specific kind of masculine energy that most men never develop, regardless of how old they get. Here's what's interesting. Most older men assume they need to compete with younger men. Better clothes, more energy, keep up, but that's the wrong game entirely. The men who naturally attract younger women aren't trying to be younger. They're doing something completely different, and most of them don't even realize they're doing it. Stay with me, because by type 4, you're going to hear something that genuinely surprises you. It flips one of the most common assumptions about attraction completely on its head. Let's start with type 1. The man who doesn't need your approval. This one runs through almost every other type on this list. There's a man who walks into a room and doesn't scan it looking for confirmation that he belongs. He's not checking to see if people noticed him. He's not adjusting his behavior based on who's watching. He just exists, fully, comfortably, without apology. That is deeply attractive to a younger woman. Not because she's naive, but because she's surrounded by men her age who are constantly performing, constantly signaling, constantly waiting to be validated by someone else before they feel okay about themselves. Psychologists call this internal locus of control. The belief that your sense of worth comes from within rather than from other people's reactions. Women pick up on it instantly. They can't always name it. They just know they feel more comfortable around a man like this, more at ease. And ease in attraction is everything. The man who doesn't need your approval isn't cold, he's not dismissive, he's warm, present, engaged. He just doesn't require you to tell him he's enough. That difference, subtle as it sounds, changes everything about how he moves, how he speaks, how he sits in silence, and women notice all of it. Type 2, the man who has already survived something. Here's a truth about attraction that doesn't get talked about enough. Younger women are not looking for a man who has never struggled. They're looking for a man who has struggled and made it through. There's a psychological concept called post-traumatic growth. It's the idea that certain people, after going through serious hardship, don't just recover, they become more grounded, more self-aware, more capable of real emotional depth. And that depth is palpable. You can feel it in a conversation with someone who has it. A man in his 40s or 50s who has been through a difficult divorce, a career collapse, a health scare, a loss, and has genuinely processed it rather than suppressed it, carries a kind of quiet gravity that is almost impossible to fake. He doesn't perform toughness. He doesn't need to. He's already been tested, and he knows it. Younger women, whether consciously or not, are drawn to that gravity. It signals emotional resilience. It signals that he won't fall apart when things get hard, that he won't run when the relationship requires something real from him. In a dating landscape full of men who vanish at the first sign of complexity, a man who stays and who has proven to himself that he can is extraordinarily rare. Type 3, the man who doesn't rush. This one is subtle, but it's one of the most powerful things on this list. We live in a world of constant urgency. Younger men, in particular, tend to rush conversations, decisions, physical intimacy. There's an anxious energy underneath a lot of male dating behavior that pushes too fast, over-explains, over-texts, over-tries. It communicates insecurity even when the words are saying something completely different. An older man who is genuinely settled in himself doesn't rush. He takes his time choosing his words. He lets silences exist without immediately trying to fill them. He makes decisions with consideration rather than reaction. And this patience reads as power. There's actual neuroscience behind this. When someone slows down in a high-stakes interaction, it signals to the nervous system of the person they're with that there is no threat, no urgency, no scarcity. Paradoxically, the slower and more measured a man is, the more interested he appears, not less. Because only someone who is genuinely confident takes their time. A younger woman talking to a man like this often describes the same experience. She came away from the conversation feeling heard, fully heard, not just listened to, actually received. And that feeling, in a world of distracted half-conversations, is intoxicating. Type 4. The man who has a strong opinion and doesn't need her to share it. Here's the one I told you was coming, the one that flips things. Most men, when they want to attract someone, become incredibly agreeable. They soften their opinions, they laugh along, they match energy. They think this makes them likable, and in a very shallow way, it does. People feel good around someone who agrees with them. But deep attraction, the kind that becomes obsessive, the kind that keeps someone thinking about a man long after the conversation ends, is almost never built on agreement. It's built on differentiation, a man who has a genuine perspective, who disagrees respectfully but clearly without getting defensive about it, who can sit with a woman who thinks something completely different and say, with total ease, "That's an interesting way to see it. I actually think the opposite. Here's why." And then listen to her response without needing to win. This is not arrogance. Arrogance needs you to be wrong so he can feel right. This is something different. It's intellectual confidence. The conviction of someone who has had enough experiences, formed enough real opinions, and tested enough beliefs against reality that he actually knows what he thinks, and doesn't feel threatened when someone else thinks differently. Younger women describe men like this as fascinating. They use that word specifically, and they keep coming back, not because the man told them what they wanted to hear, but because he made them think. Type 5. The man who controls his environment. There's a specific kind of older man who, when he walks into a restaurant, knows the name of the person seating him within 2 minutes. Not because he's showing off, he's not loud about it, he's not performing it for anyone, but because he genuinely moves through the world with that kind of intentional presence. He notices the people around him, he tips well and quietly. He doesn't micromanage, but things tend to go smoothly around him because he communicates clearly and treats people as if they matter. The waiter, the valet, the colleague, consistently. Younger women are exquisitely sensitive to this. How a man treats people who can't do anything for him is one of the fastest reads on his actual character. And a man who moves through his environment with quiet authority and genuine consideration, not performing niceness, but actually having it, signals safety. And safety, in attraction, is not the opposite of excitement. It's the foundation of it. Without it, excitement becomes anxiety. With it, excitement becomes desire. Type 6. The man who doesn't need to be the most important thing in the room. This one surprises people. You'd think that dominant presence, being the loudest, most central, most noticed, would be the most attractive version of a man. And in a very surface-level, brief encounter kind of way, it can be. But sustained attraction, the kind that deepens over time, that's built by a man who is fully present with the person in front of him, not with the room. An older man who has already proven himself doesn't need to prove himself tonight. He's not monitoring who's watching him, who's impressed, who's clocking his status. He's just here, with you, and that full attention is one of the rarest and most powerful gifts one person can give another. Psychologists who study attachment describe this as a tuned presence, being not just physically there, but emotionally calibrated to the person you're with. It's the opposite of half listening while scanning the room. And women, particularly women who have experienced the alternative, men who are physically present but emotionally elsewhere, feel the difference immediately. This is the man who makes you feel, after one conversation, like you've known him far longer than you have. Type 7, the man who is becoming something. This might be the most important one. There's a myth that goes like this. Older men are attractive because they've arrived. They've made it. They're finished products. Done. That's wrong. The most attractive older men are not finished. They are still moving, still building, still curious, still reaching towards something, a business, a craft, a skill, a purpose that genuinely matters to them. They have the groundedness of experience and the fire of someone who still has somewhere to go. A man who stopped growing at 40, who coasts on what he already built, who has no vision of what's next. That man, regardless of his status, starts to feel stagnant to a perceptive woman within weeks. But a man of 50 who gets up early because he's working on something he believes in, who reads because he's genuinely interested in the world, who talks about the future with the same energy as his past, who has goals he hasn't reached yet, that man is alive in a way that younger men are still learning how to be. That aliveness, that forward momentum, is one of the most underestimated elements of masculine attractiveness. It has nothing to do with age. It has everything to do with whether a man is truly living or simply maintaining. Here's what I want you to walk away with. This was never really a list about age. The men who attract younger women, who attract anyone worth attracting, are not operating on some special advantage the calendar gave them. They're operating from a version of themselves that took years of deliberate living to build. The approval they don't need, that took failures, rejections, and the slow realization that external validation is a trap. The emotional depth, that took pain, loss, and the courage to process it rather than bury it. The patience, the opinions, the presence, the forward momentum, all of it was earned. None of it was accidental. What actually attracts is development. The man who takes his psychological and emotional growth as seriously as anything else in his life. The man who knows himself well enough that he doesn't have to perform himself for anyone else. That is the real insight. Not that younger women are drawn to older men, but that they're drawn to men who have done the internal work, and that this is accessible at any age to anyone willing to do it. The men watching this who are 30, the work starts now. The men who are 50, it's not too late. It was never about the number. It was always about the depth behind the eyes, the steadiness in the posture, and the quiet confidence of someone who knows, without needing to say it, exactly who he is. That is what desire is actually made of. Now, if this shifted something in how you think about attraction and masculine presence, there's one more thing you need to see. Because understanding what draws people together is only half of it. The other half? It's the small, almost invisible moments after that connection begins. The ones that determine whether someone keeps thinking about you long after you've said goodbye. And I made a video about one specific moment that most people completely overlook. It's called, "Do This When He Hugs You," and you'll stay in his mind forever. And after what we just covered, it's going to hit completely differently. It's right there on your screen. Don't scroll past it.